Hello and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast where we talk about the intersection of art, culture, and big ideas. I'm your host, Sean Malone, creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education and creator of Out of Frame, video essay series on YouTube. Here with me today is our Out of Frame Shorts editor, Paul Nelson, and of course, Jennifer Mafsanti, who is still writing our Out of Frame Shorts.
Yes.
But is about to move. Jen.
Yes, I am.
We're starting our recording, I think our last live recording session here. We'll be doing 2 episodes, so there will be one more that you'll appear on in studio, and then we're going to lose you, I think. Well, we're not going to lose you from the show.
Yes.
But Jen will be replaced by a robot, probably somewhere over here.
Something like that.
Robot Jen.
Robot Jen.
Genbot.
Genbot. For those who don't get that joke, which it might not be everybody actually, Jen is also, or had been for a good long while, the co-writer for Common Sense Soapbox with Seamus Coughlin. And we're the creator of Genbot, among other fine characters for that show. But so how's the house hunt going?
It's going well.
Better?
Yes.
Good.
Where were we last time? Where did we
failures?
Failures.
Disappointment.
Disappointment. Yes.
Crushing disappointment.
I think the last time we checked in on this story, I was very frustrated. Couldn't find a house that I wanted to buy. I was a hair's breadth away from just saying screw it and building my own house. I'm not there anymore. Thankfully, we have found a house to purchase in Utah.
That is much easier.
That is much easier.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of a compromise because it's not exactly everything that we wanted, but it does have enough room to build onto it.
Okay.
Nice.
So that's what we're doing, a hybrid kind of situation here.
Okay.
So
So I think most people know that your husband Andrew races cars.
Yes.
And has a lot of has some cars and lots of parts for cars and things of that nature.
Yes, and tools and all of that.
Is that what's kind of missing, or is there
Basically.
So you need more garage space?
Yes. What we're going to be doing is the house itself is pretty much everything that we wanted it to be. But what we're going to do is build a big detached workshop in the backyard.
Nice.
This is also for safety purposes because workshops have a higher likelihood of catching on fire.
Yeah.
So
internal combustion engines can do that.
And
these kinds of workshops,
welders
That too.
and
I feel like
other power tools. It's a legitimate risk. It's not a big risk, but it's not zero risk.
Going on the longer term vision
Yes.
for my wife and I building a house, which we've talked about before a little bit. It's the thing that we really want to do. I also want to build a detached area, but it's going to be a studio, not too unlike this, that has space for musical instruments and recording space and filming space and stuff like that. Less likely to combust.
Less likely, probably.
Probably much safer than the workshop.
Those hot licks are going to be cranking out.
That's right. Now, short of an electrical fire, I think we'll be probably fine. We're actually going to talk to a builder next week.
Ooh.
Cool.
This is new.
We're still very far away from this, but we wanted to talk to somebody, give them a sense of what we're thinking about, and then get them to maybe give us a sense of like what's possible and what the price is going to be and all that kind of stuff, so that over the next couple of years we can adjust our plans accordingly, or reduce our sense of our expectations or whatever. But I'm hoping in a couple of years we can do that. The other thing too is we're bringing my wife's parents down from Maryland, so probably by this time next year, or maybe even a little bit earlier, I think the beginning of January, they'll probably be living down here.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's big.
Yeah.
That's like going to be a huge change.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. Hopefully it's good. I mean, part of this is, driven by the health problems. My wife's dad has some health problems. And honestly, because some of the COVID stuff,
Yeah.
He's not been able to see doctors in Maryland, and it's actually been
Maryland's not exactly a
no, it's not
beacon of freedom.
It's not a beacon of freedom at all. And one of the consequences to this that people don't really realize is that because we've shut down hospitals and doctors' offices, and we've told people not to go to routine checkups and get elective procedures done and all of those kinds of things. My father-in-law has gone from a position of not super great health to begin with to a position where he's got serious kidney problems that are going to require dialysis and things like that. And that it actually kind of makes me angry because it's a thing that did not need to happen.
Preventable.
It was definitely preventable, but it was something that the lockdowns themselves contributed to. He doesn't have COVID. I mean, that's not the issue here, right? So, I don't know. That's pretty irritating. Seeing the way that states have handled this and seeing people not really take the costs in mind and really get a full accounting of like what we're losing on some of these things.
But they had to do something.
Right. Something. Anything. Man. I think that maybe is actually not a bad segue into doing something with the two movies we're going to talk about today. All fit into one big overarching bucket of government surveillance and doing something to stop a threat. So on the main show today, we're going to be talking about Snowden from 2016 by Oliver Stone. And then in our Patreon bonus episode, which we'll do after the main episode is over for all of those of you who support us on Patreon, it's patreon.com/outoframeshow. We'll be talking about the documentary about Edward Snowden called Citizen 4. So with that in mind, let's get into a discussion of Snowden, which obviously about Edward Snowden and the leaks in 2016 and earlier. I guess when the first one started was in 2013, I think. 2016 is the continuation of a lot of this stuff. Yeah. But all of this came out around government spying and everything else. But it all started because of 9/11. So I kind of want to start there a little bit. And because I think we were all old enough to remember that day and that experience. I was my first year of college actually, and I was in the eating breakfast under the stadium. Sorry, this is a little bit of a tangent, but going to a big football school, you learn pretty quickly that the football players get really good food, and everybody else gets less good food.
You gotta bring in the money.
But being in the band got you into the stadium, where their food was.
That's good.
So all the marching band members would eat breakfast at the stadium, and then we're sitting in there, and I'm sitting in there with guys who are towering over me, just 300-pound, 6'8" athletes, and the TVs are on, but they're muted, and this scene of the World Trade Center towers and plane, the first plane flies into it. And I look up at this and just completely ignore it. I just look at it and I'm like, oh, this is like a Roland Emmerich movie, right? Like this is just a clip from some, blockbuster or something that's coming out. And then like everybody started getting quieter and quieter and quieter. And you're kind of not, you're not really aware of this. And then then the whole room is just dead silent. We're all looking at this TV. And it's like, oh, that's CNN. That's not, this is not a movie. This is happening. And so we turned it on, and that was just a really big, it's obviously, I think it's a formative moment for a lot of people. But, one of my first thoughts was kind of, what are we going to do in response to this? Because this is terrifying. But I was already at that point somebody who was pretty aware of the state's propensity to grab power in these kinds of situations. And really, one of my very first thoughts was like, freedom is going to suffer for this. What were your guys' sort of first?
Well,
so you were a little bit younger.
I was a little bit younger, not too terribly much. I was a senior in high school. I was 16 years old. And I remember I went to, as a senior, I had the privilege of choosing to start school a class period early and then leave school a class period early because I could drive myself to and from school. So that's what I did.
Never an option for me.
My high school years were. I was at the high school at 5 a.m. and I was not back till 7.
Well, it was one of those things that I always elected to do both years that, I was allowed to do it. So I would come into school a class period before most people. That was AP English for me. And so that morning I was there at 7:30 like usual. Had pretty bog standard AP English class. And we're all pretty focused because this is a advanced placement class and we need to get ready for the AP exam at the end of the year.
Was this in Alabama?
Yes, it was.
Is that Central
so
Time?
So Central Time.
Okay, so this is happening. You and I are telling the story at exactly the same time. So it'd be about 7 o'clock in the morning, or 7:30 or whatever it was.
So and then that class period ended, and then the first official class of the school day began at 8:30 in the morning. And for me, that was anatomy and physiology. So bell rings, I leave English. I have a general sense that the mood in the hallway is different.
Yeah.
But I can't figure out exactly why. And it's a bit of a hike for me from my English class to my anatomy class. And I only have 6 minutes to get there, so I got to hustle. So I just go to class, and I walk into my anatomy class, and the TV is on, which is unusual for this class. And everybody is very subdued and very quiet, and we're all just watching, in time for pretty immediate replays of the second plane. And that is a stunning feeling. Because when you're 16 years old, 17 years old, 18 years old, you are invincible. And that is something that in your bones, right? That is not a thing that has ever come into question for most people by this point in their life. And once information started to filter in, I had a classmate whose mother worked at the UN building in New York.
Wow.
So there was a moment of panic for him where he had to, go down to the office and make contact with his mom and make sure that she was okay, stuff like that. It was a very surreal day. And to be perfectly honest, I don't remember a whole lot about it. It was all very blurry. Nothing was normal.
Yeah, I don't.
And nothing. We experienced a trauma, and so there's some patchy memories there. But I remember.
I don't remember much past just the breakfast. That was pretty much it. I remember the time, and it was. I don't know. I think when we were in there, it was probably after our rehearsals. It probably would have been 9:30 or so. And I don't know if it was replays. I don't know if it was in real time. I have no idea. I just remember that experience of just not believing it.
Yeah.
And then having to have it replayed 3 or 4 times before. But really, and I think it was the whole room. Yeah. Really, because everybody was because it was just on in the background.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't for a bit till everybody's like, wait, that's not normal.
I do remember being afraid for my older brother. My brother is 2 years older than me, and had graduated from high school the year before, and somehow click, 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 I knew this was going to merit a military response, and I was terrified that my brother was going to be drafted.
Oh, wow!
I remember that feeling.
I mean,
in the week after. It was a Tuesday, by the way.
Was it?
It was a Tuesday.
Then I would say probably
by Friday, I was
9
properly
o'clock.
scared about that.
My dad was in the military then, retired a colonel in the Air National Guard. This is skipping ahead a little bit, but he was the commanding officer of the Kandahar Air Force Base in Afghanistan in 2003 for 3-4 months, whatever. But that's obviously a couple years later, and it's after. The funny thing is, his job really was to take a whole bunch of sort of makeshift structures that the Army and the Air Force had built and turn it into a permanent or functionally permanent base, because that was more or less his role. Prior to that was as a civil engineer, and he was a pilot when I was little, but he was at that point he was the base civil engineer in actually he might have been support group commander by that point in Nebraska. And it's an interesting. It had just a profound effect on everything.
Mm-hmm.
You were a little bit younger. How was it for you?
Yeah, so I was in 7th grade when it happened, and I don't know if I would call this luck or what, but the situation for me was that in the middle school, before school started, you had to go to the auditorium, and so once the first bell rings, you go to your first class. And I remember pretty distinctly walking down the hall, and the teachers were always staying outside their classroom, and all of them looked scared and just concerned. And I had the fortune, I don't know if it's weird, but my first class was a social studies class. Oh, so the teacher, was learning about history, and he had the TV on. And come to find out, I was one of the few at the school that they had the TV on. So the first class I was watching in real time, saw the second plane hit.
Oof.
And was just, it's one of those things just seared into my memory. And I think I was too young to really think about like that kind of stuff, like what you guys were talking about, but just that just kind of feeling of things will be different and just being scared.
Yeah.
The rest, once it all kind of played out, it wasn't really until after lunchtime that like kind of get out of that fog. And I remember just like the rest of the day, even into like football practice and stuff like that, it was just like, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
And
I don't suppose you were probably aware enough of the possible responses.
No.
Maybe.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's and also for me, being from where I was from, Southwest Kansas, at that point I might have been on a plane once.
Yeah.
I had never been in New York City. Like all this stuff was so foreign to me that it just seemed. It seemed like it was a very surreal experience.
Yeah. But
it definitely influenced my beliefs still to this day.
Yeah.
And this is, in talking about Snowden, I mean, I've joked previously about myself being a neocon and, being okay to use the big stick. And for the most part, I still believe that. But I think with Snowden, what it shows is that there's a limit. And I don't know how you want to transition this, but I get like, so like when you talk to people, but even like previously myself, the goal is to never have a 9/11 happen again, which, I mean, we've been successful. So it's work. That's what they say. It's working.
Yeah.
But at what cost?
Yeah. And also we could debate the merits of whether or not it's working. Right. I mean, so that's part of it. So let's take a step back and actually talk about the film and the story, because not everybody knows this aspect of it, although I would hope most people do at this point. But essentially after 9/11, there became this huge international, anti-terrorism sort of national security effort kind of mobilized, not just the military, but also all of our intelligence agencies and a whole bunch of private contractors, and because it wasn't just anymore about this is 2001. It's actually kind of right at the peak of the .com bubble, and so the internet is starting to be a real thing that people really are using constantly.
In
right?
2001, we didn't even have Wi-Fi yet.
There's no actual Wi-Fi, but there is broadband at this point, and this is kind of and I think it's important to set the stage here a little bit, because you've got to understand, especially if you're younger, you've really got to understand that like the internet was new and scary, and nobody really knew what you could do with it. So in addition to a lot of the standard military aspects of things, they started getting pretty heavy into tech and into developing, automation systems for tracking people, and for the first time ever, you could start, because you could always wiretap people, right? Like there were always ways that you could sort of record something, but you'd be recording it to tape, right? And then how do you store that tape? How do you search it later? Speaking as somebody who first started video production around this same time, we were using tapes, and I remember my first job having just a wall of tapes on which you had, they were all labeled by hand, and if you open them up, you would see time codes and labels for different clips and cues and stuff that were all hand done. But of course, how would you search that? You literally physically have to go there and look at the wall. It takes forever. A human being has to be involved. So by the mid 2000s, you start seeing these computer systems doing it, and metadata, and things that allowed the government to start searching for specific information captured in recordings in a way that they'd never been able to do before.
And this is also around the same time that cell phones actually truly became affordable.
Yeah.
And so almost anyone could have one.
Right.
By then. Today, it's even more prevalent. But at the time,
so
it was in 2001, it was a huge deal if you had a cell phone.
Yeah.
You were like hot stuff,
Yeah.
when I was in high school to have a cell phone.
No, I know. I would actually sort of encourage everybody to go back and watch movies from the 80s and 90s where having a car phone is just, it's the sign of the richest person, the Wall Street tycoon.
Me,
call me on my
fancy.
car phone.
Right, has the car. Well, and you're pulling out the antenna, but I'm even thinking about the ones that are wired into your car.
Oh,
the bag phones?
The bag phones.
Totally wired.
I remember
into
the bag phones.
But this stuff it's kind of new at this point, 2005, 6, 7, that kind of territory. And but what's happening now is you got people like Ed Snowden who are now working on building systems to analyze, track, like code, all of this stuff, all of the data that's coming in. Now, also we should step back and say, historically, you would have to get a warrant to wiretap somebody. I mean, this is the way that the Fourth Amendment is supposed to work, right? You are supposed to be guaranteed against unlawful search and seizure without cause, right? And so cause is something that you have to prove to a judge and actually get the warrant in order to spy on people.
And it's not just cause. You also have to identify, allegedly, the specific person being targeted and the specific place being searched and the specific items to be seized.
Exactly. So it is not something where the way that the Constitution works in particular, it's amazing to me when you think about this. This is written into the Bill of Rights 30 plus years ago. No, almost 250 years ago.
17.
I have to do the math on this. Should have been 1789.
89, 90, I think
roughly.
is when
my math
the
is,
Bill of Rights is
None of this matters,
ratified.
though. Some of them owned slaves.
Hundreds, right?
So.
God. Yeah, so, jeez. So the point, though, is this is how the laws of the United States have been for the entire time.
Yeah.
Right? This was part of how we got the Constitution ratified in the first place.
Yeah.
Was explicitly with the Bill of Rights attached. I don't believe, and I know a lot of historians would agree that the Constitution would not have been ratified by all the states without the Bill of Rights in tow.
Oh, certainly not.
Exactly. In fact, I think about a majority of the states only ratified the Constitution because it was promised that a Bill of Rights would be added. And North Carolina and Rhode Island refused to do it at all until the Bill of Rights was there and in place.
Yeah. So this is pretty integral to the way that we should think about the laws of our country. And something changed. I didn't look it up, so I don't know when the FISA court started. I'm trying to remember what year. I think I might have. If I was smart, I would have written this down, but I don't think I did. But I don't think it was part of the Patriot Act. I think it was a separate thing shortly thereafter. But it was probably in 2001 or 2002 that we got the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act passed, which authorized the what we now call FISA courts, which are secret courts, which are top secret, potentially completely closed to the public, closed to the press, closed even to other members of Congress and to other branches of government. But it's a court where judges preside over cases where, for terrorism or for, now it gets used for for the drug war kind of prosecution stuff, where law enforcement could go and petition to get a warrant to spy on somebody, to surveil somebody. The problem is FISA courts have they've always been basically a rubber stamp. Mm-hmm. So I did look this up, which was smart. From research in 2013, FISA courts rejected a grand total of 0.03% of all requests.
How egregious must those 0.03% of requests have been?
So I'm saying there's a chance. In 2017, they denied a record number of requests, 26 out of 1,614, bringing the full rejection rate up to 0.11%.
Oh, excuse me.
So
we're on the right track.
We're on the right track. It's we're
getting there.
So bringing all of this together back with Snowden, this is sort of the groundwork where Ed Snowden is in the middle of the systems that are tracking and building and coding and searching all of this information that is being tracked secretly without the American public's knowledge. The American public was being told, like James Clapper, the head of the NSA, was out there telling people that we would never spy on American citizens.
Not.
We would never track their movements without
not intentionally.
Right, not intentionally, of course. We might accidentally pick up if somebody was doing something wrong, right? So he's literally on TV, under oath, on C-SPAN, under oath, talking to the Senate or talking to Congress, lying, flat out lying, while Snowden is behind the scenes with his teams. And so Edward Snowden decides to do something about this, and he gets together, we said in 2013, reaches out to Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras. I think I'm saying her name right. Never think I'm saying her name right, but
It's a hard one.
Poitras?
I'm not sure.
I'm going to say it that way. Who is a documentarian, and Glenn Greenwald, who is, now even fairly prominent journalist, to conduct a secret meeting where he gets together with them and explains all this stuff to them and leaks a trove of data that he pulled out of this to The Guardian. So I think Glenn Greenwald was working for The Guardian at the time.
Yep.
And that's basically the movie, is just all this information getting sort of dumped. And then what does Glenn Greenwald and what does The Guardian do with this, and what happens to Snowden, what happens. And a lot of this is like his experiences leading up to this, working for the CIA and as Booz Allen Hamilton and as a contractor for different security contractors and stuff like that. But it's tough, man. Like for me, for somebody who cares a lot about these kinds of issues, like watching a movie like this is like just maddening.
It is frustrating. And I think what this movie does well is try to humanize him, because I remember when this first coming out, the immediate response from the government news media is like,
he's a traitor.
He's a traitor. He's a spy. Mm-hmm. How did he get this access? He obviously is like some kind of super hacker.
Yeah.
Cannot trust him. Oh, he went to Russia, so obviously he's a Russian spy. So I think this movie did a pretty good job of that. I think we'll talk about later in the Patreon bonus about Citizen 4. I think it does a better job.
I agree.
Yeah,
actually,
But I think that's where this could have gone I think with Oliver Stone's track record,
Yeah.
could have probably very easily glossed over the Edward Snowden's disappointment with Barack Obama.
Oh yeah.
But that's an
Yeah.
integral part of it. So that
Yes.
really, like, even if Oliver Stone is saying this, then we might have a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, so that is actually a super important aspect of this, because I think all this is happening initially, it's all this is happening under George Bush. And then when Barack Obama gets elected, he makes all these promises about, we're not going to do what Bush did, and our government is going to be better than this, and we're going to, it's all the stuff that we saw really publicly, like closing Guantanamo and all of these kinds of things that were big scandals under the Bush administration.
Which remind me, is that still open?
Oh yes, actually, in fact, it is still open.
Just wanted to double check on that one.
But so Snowden. And this is the story that's in both films. Really, is Snowden. Why? Because the question is, why didn't you come forward in 2008? What if you were part of this and this was happening in 2008? Why didn't you come forward then? Why didn't we hear about it then? Well, Snowden sort of thought it was done. Right? Like when Barack Obama gets elected, he kind of goes, oh, okay, well, the things that were happening, we're going to put a stop to that now because we've got somebody who's promised not to do this stuff anymore. Okay. That didn't happen, though. Got worse.
Yeah.
In fact, significantly worse. In fact, at least the way that both movies kind of portray this, and in particular Snowden.
You just look at technology, of course it got worse.
Yeah, the technology advances, and some of Snowden's work on other projects now gets rolled into the system to create. I think the main thing is X-Keyscore, which is basically a search program that allows you to search phones and records from anybody, anywhere, anytime. It's kind of like, it really is like the scene in Batman. It's Batman Begins. No, it's not.
No,
it's
Dark Knight.
Dark Knight, where he's got all the cell phones up, and it's kind of that. It's that level of surveillance, and of course that's some of what Nolan was commenting on in that context. But got worse, So Snowden starts to freak out and starts to do stuff about it, and and it's interesting. I think one of the things, talking about humanizing it, is just the toll that it's taking on him personally. He's starting to have seizures. Like, his health is getting really, really bad. His relationship
is suffering.
Yeah, terrible.
His mental health is garbage. It's stressful.
But I think that's important, because I think it's important to understand the toll that being a part of that was doing. Because it's hard to imagine somebody with top secret clearance, doing this at some point. Like, it has to be so bad to get to a point where you're saying, oh no, I'm gonna actually blow this wide open. I'm not just gonna go to my superiors and say, I don't agree with this and I want to be moved to a different project, but like, no, the public needs to know about this. That's such a huge step to take.
Mm-hmm. And there were lots of accusations of Snowden at the time, of Snowden being a coward. Yeah. And like, only a coward would go to the news with this. Right. And the man has not been home since 2013. Right. He has not seen his family since 2013. Yeah. He has lost everything that he had built for himself until that point. And there is no way he's ever getting that back. Would you do something like that as a matter of principle, believing that it was the right thing to do for the public to know that they were being spied on by their government?
I think that's the kind of question that, like, literally no one can answer until they're
of course,
in that situation.
There's no way to know how you would behave in that situation until you're in it. But everybody likes to think that they'd be the hero. But when it comes down to it, most people aren't.
Yeah. So let's talk about the movie for a second, because we'll talk about the issues a little bit more as we go on. But Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays Ed Snowden. Shailene Woodley is his girlfriend, now wife, I believe.
Yes.
Lindsay Mills. Zachary Quinto?
Yes.
Yes.
Saying Quinto, right?
Spock.
Spock.
I remember him from Heroes, but sure. Siler.
Oh, I forgot about Heroes.
Is Glenn Greenwald. Glenn actually is an interesting character anyway, just because he broke this and he's broken tons of other big stories that are mostly in the same vein, stuff with WikiLeaks and Julian Assange and all that kind of stuff, and then founded The Intercept, which he just left.
Jeez.
Yes.
Because The Intercept was essentially trying to censor criticism of Biden during the run-up to the election, which is just, to me, it just speaks really highly of Greenwald, because he's self-described, lefty, essentially, doesn't have much interest in the United States, literally lives in Brazil, doesn't really like the United States very much. And yet is, I think, really strongly committed to, I don't know if, maybe I'm not even being fair to say he doesn't like the United States. He doesn't live here, and he's been very critical of the United States. That doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't like it. But he seems to be primarily committed to doing truthful journalism as much as possible, and certainly he has biases, and you can see this with The Intercept's work anyway, or with The Guardian or whatever, but the fact that he would quit the very successful news outlet that he started because he did not want to censor himself because of staff concerns about the election is, I think, also pretty impressive. So he's a good character in general. Quinto, I think, does a pretty good job. Everybody, I think, does a pretty good job.
I think this movie is well cast.
Yeah.
Strong performances all around.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I feel like, is not.
He's probably the weakest character.
He might be. He might be in some. Well, but I think he was pretty accurate to what I've seen of the real life Ed Snowden. I mean, he's a pretty flat guy. Like, he's not a very excitable speaker in any kind of way. Levitt's weird though, because I feel like he's sort of underrated. Like, he's such a niche actor, and he does so many indies and little things, and he kind of just feels like a very picky actor in a lot of ways. But I think
that's probably true.
Does a really good job here. Nicolas Cage
plays
surprise
the same character that he was in The Rock.
Yeah, I think this, if Snowden wasn't a true story, based on a true story, I think a strong argument could be made that they inhabit the same universe as The Rock.
I mean, that's the same dude.
It's the same guy.
Yeah.
He plays Hank Forrester, who was a code breaker and a guy who worked on some of these systems initially for the CIA. I assume the CIA. I think it was in the CIA. And he's just Stanley Goodspeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grown up.
Has the same
just old man Stanley Goodspeed.
Has the same speaking pattern, has the same interests in
proclivities to vinyl and record collecting, and
it was that's the scene where he got a call from Snowden towards the end. I think it was, and I was like, that's Stanley Goodspeed.
It's Stanley Goodspeed. I know. That was kind of crazy. Although a little subdued, I will say, compared to the
little bit.
Just a little bit.
I mean, that first conversation he had with a person he never met before in his life.
That is true. That was a bold conversation. Although I don't know if we give that to Nick Cage or if we give that to Oliver Stone. I'm not entirely sure. But in any case, the one thing I wanted to kind of bring into this before we sort of close this part of the conversation is, we just put out the first, and actually, by the time you guys see this, we'll have put out the second episode. So the two parts of the Social Dilemma set that I did for Out of Frame. And one of the things that I think is most enraging to me about the Social Dilemma, and we talked about this on our podcast episode on the Social Dilemma too, is the idea of giving government more power to spy on people. I mean, we didn't even really get into here, like one of the things that Snowden makes clear is that if you get a FISA warrant for one person, because you can get to the networks of those people, and the network's a couple tiers out, you can effectively turn one warrant into spying on millions of people, like 2+ million people, just through the network effects.
Yeah.
And that was assuming in the film they were just talking about if that person is connected to 40 people and those people are connected to 40 people. People are connected to way more than 40 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you can spy on one person and look at their Facebook interactions and then look at all of their friends' interactions, because this is what the counterterrorism stuff is trying to do, right? They're trying
Yeah.
to piece together networks and pull in things like that. You can literally get to millions, maybe tens of millions at this point, very, very quickly.
Yeah.
There's no way they're not at total coverage of
Oh, it's got to be. Yeah.
at least the United States, probably.
Because it doesn't matter. You could literally one person, you
Yeah.
could connect to every other person through a couple degrees.
Yeah.
You know, it's not.
and with the
that
rate
hard to do
of
at this
rejection,
I know. So you could just get another warrant and just
you have
carry
200 warrants, and then
yeah.
That's it. That's the
There you
show.
go.
So the social dilemma makes this argument that we should give the government power to regulate social media companies to prevent things like privacy loss, which is insane.
Like, do you guys even?
but the government is something we do together.
It's yes. What is it? Taxes are the price we pay for a civilized society, I
Oh
believe.
my,
You need,
to think
roads.
that
Roads.
roads
We just need some roads.
to genuinely believe that it is going to be the United
Oh my
States
God.
government that's going to protect our privacy.
Yeah.
I don't know how you get there.
I don't think
From
you
a
do.
from an intellectual standpoint, you're just lying to yourself or you're lying to us.
Yeah.
Well,
One
I-
of the two.
I think it's just you're comfortable with that. You
Yeah.
have to, like you're more comfortable with somebody, an unelected bureaucrat, having control over your privacy than you are a private business owner. And
But I do think, to Jen's point, I think there is an element of this that people are, I think they're sticking their heads in the sand about it too. I think they don't want to, I think a lot of people have, at least in my experience, a lot of people have a vision of government as this angelic
Right.
sort of, even if it's not always, even if they recognize that, like, if they look at it in the news, like, there are always scandals and everything else, but they look at the institution and say, well, this institution is meant to make our lives better and protect people from threats and just make all the good decisions for everybody. Now, whether or not that tracks with reality is a whole, that's a whole thing, but it's something I think a lot of people can compartmentalize. So I do think that they're kind of like just sticking their heads in the sand.
I definitely give people, in my mind, like, how can you not see this? So I think it's like, you obviously
Yeah.
want this to happen. So
Yeah.
maybe that's just a flaw on my end, where I'm just not giving people the benefit of the doubt.
Well, but I think you're also right that people, like, if they're faced, a lot of people anyway, if they're faced with let a private company do X or have the government do X, they'll side with the state. I don't typically, because I recognize that, like, with a private company, I can say no.
Yeah.
I can back away. I won't be arrested. I won't be fined. Like, there's nothing apart from the state, unless that company is embedded in some legal institution. Mm-hmm. There's not much Amazon can do to force me to shop at Amazon. I can literally not do that and just go elsewhere. I don't do that with something like Amazon because Amazon makes my life better. If they stop doing that, look, there's been plenty of companies that have stopped making my life better that I've stopped paying.
Yeah.
Like Blockbuster Video is a great example. Like, I
Exactly.
stopped going and everybody else stopped going because I didn't want the late fees. I didn't want everything else that was going on with Blockbuster. And now there's an alternative, so I can go there instead. Can't do that with government.
No.
So to me, it's something we have to be very, very, very careful about what you allow them to do. You should be careful with your privacy in general,
Yes.
but the last people I want in charge of any of this stuff is people who actively throw people
You
in
have
jail.
recourse against another private party that hacks you.
Yeah.
Sure.
The government does. Who do you go to?
Yeah. Nobody. At least nobody who cares. Nobody who'll listen or do anything about
Right.
it.
Nobody who can do anything about it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
just allowing the government to have more control over our private, not even privacy concerns, but just expand it out to government has control of X.
Yeah.
And you go through our history and you have events like what we did with Native Americans. Mm-hmm. And that's prescribed to racism, which it was, but it's still the federal government using power to displace people.
Yeah.
And then you go through to World War II.
Yep.
With all that stuff with Japanese internment, and you just like down the line, overreaching, and you just kind of see the end game here where nobody intends for people to be rounded up.
No.
But then it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's for your own good.
Well, and I will point out, just because I do want to wrap up this section because we're kind of running long already, but I will say, if you look at, we don't know all of what the U.S. government has done with this information. A lot of that is secretive. A lot of that is in a black box. We do know that what some other countries have done with some of this information. We've seen Russia round up gay and lesbian people and just LGBTQ people because, like, based on social media posts and things like that. We've seen China do the same thing. We've seen China also round up people who are dissidents or people who are, people in Hong Kong who are trying to protest and things like that, using these tools to monitor social media, monitor people's communications, track that, and then go arrest people and throw them in jail. That happen.
Yeah.
It happens here too.
The capability is there. We just, at this point, the only thing holding our government back from doing it is the will.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see that breaking down.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a pretty dark note to end on. But so I'll just say I would recommend watching Snowden. I definitely think I'm actually really not a fan of Oliver Stone. I should have said this up front. I don't like Oliver Stone very much. This is one of the most responsible films I think he's ever made.
Down the middle.
It's pretty down the middle.
Which was surprising.
It's not super conspiratorial. Like, it doesn't have a lot of facts that can't be supported by what we've seen from the leaks and from WikiLeaks and stuff like that since. It's pretty good. And I say that as not a fan of Oliver Stone.
Yeah.
So would recommend.
Solid film. Not, the most cheerful watch.
No.
I mean, don't expect to end the movie feeling great.
You know what, though? This movie does try to do, it tries to end on a positive note.
It does.
And it falls so flat to me.
Does.
It's like, and then the newspapers broke the story. And
Yay.
And then you're like, but also it's still
7 years later,
Yeah.
nothing changed.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a whole bunch of newspaper articles at the end that are like, Congress enacts some policy to stop the...
No.
Spoilers, they did not.
No.
That did not happen.
But yeah, I think it is
We talked about it.
I think it is
Publicly.
an important story.
Yeah.
And whether you watch Snowden, Citizen 4, or just read about it, I mean, this is something that you should know about.
No.
Yeah.
This is for me. This is a good movie. I think the documentary we're going to talk about for the bonus is more powerful.
Yes.
Which is kind of surprising, but for me, like this time period, all this stuff that happened is kind of when for me has been the switch clicked. The switch switched over to, oh, this is not great. I was always like, government's not great, but it was always there.
Yeah.
They're just kind of too stupid for their own. That's what I always attributed to. It was just the wrong incentives, that kind of thing. But then this starts getting into, no, they're actually actively working against you. And then
this is where you
history.
can see, I think, where you can see the real consequences of this level of concentrated power.
No.
Yeah.
Like, you can't, and by the way, I don't put this in a conspiracy category either. This is a lot of people inside the government working on stuff that lots and lots of people knew about to one degree or another. It's not like anybody was going to work going like, ooh, we're going to do a thing standard top secret stuff and they just think this is the next phase of counterterrorism, or the next phase of whatever. It's not a small cabal of people doing something here. It's a very large number of people working on a major initiative that got talked about publicly in euphemistic ways, right? Like we're creating the best tools and the most advanced technology and whatever, and the American people and Congress just said, sure, yeah, great.
It's
Protect
easy.
us
It's like when we started this episode off, it's easy to get people to say yes to something when
they're scared.
When they're scared.
When you have, like, I am 31 years old. I still remember that day very clearly.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, we could get into COVID stuff from there, but let's end here.
Yeah.
Let's end here. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you're a member on Patreon or if you're a supporter on Patreon, patreon.com/outoframeshow, stick around and we are going to continue this conversation a little bit with the documentary Citizen 4, which is also about the same subject. If you're not a supporter of the show on Patreon, please consider it. We're actually going to be expanding a little bit into Subscribestar. So if Patreon's not something that you're comfortable with for a lot of the privacy and sort of social media reasons that we've talked about,
you can say no to Patreon.
You can say no to Patreon. You can join us on Subscribestar. We should have that out in a little bit. Also, be sure to follow us on YouTube. Follow Out of Frame on YouTube and Instagram. Twitter, and soon
we got some good stuff.
TikTok.
We got some big stuff cooking. So
got some big stuff cooking. But thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.